Tonight on Diabetes Chat, we're joined by Shaun Carpenter. Shaun lives with type 1 diabetes, and tonight we'll be hearing about his diabetes diagnosis and his story. We'll also be talking about technology, AAPS, which Shaun uses, and we'll be chatting about peer support, mental health, and the amazing advocacy things Shaun has been part of. So, welcome to Diabetes Chat, Shaun.
Hi, Kirsty.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Fortunately, managed to avoid all the sorts of things that Flipper seems to have attracted at the moment. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed it stays like that.
Yeah, that's what we like to hear. There's a lot of rotten bugs coming about, and I think we've got plenty of time left in winter to catch them. So we'll just try and avoid them.
And I've got my flu jab tomorrow night, so I'm hoping that will keep them away a little bit more.
Oh, do you? I need to book mine. I'm terrible. I always forget. Every year I forget. Since I think I moved out of my parents' house, I've forgotten. I don't have my mum nagging me. We'll start with a question. So, what symptoms did you have when you were diagnosed with diabetes? If you want to talk a bit about your diagnosis story.
Yeah, so I had very few symptoms, to be honest. I'd sort of made it through to age 18 with no trouble. I'd always been quite a skinny kid, so I didn't weigh a lot at that time. But I was doing my A levels, and I had a virus at the Christmas before the main A levels were happening. So that was the time I was doing my mocks. Unknown virus, but I was off school and in bed for a fortnight with it. And then when I recovered from it and went back, something didn't seem quite right. So I just didn't feel that great. Again, no real symptoms, none of the classic symptoms. But I remember we had some exercise tests at school, and I'd always been quite a sporty person, and mine weren't that great, which I thought was a little bit weird. And then I guess apart from that, I often used to have sort of lemonade and chocolate particularly on a weekend, on a Saturday night, and I just remember at the end of the evening, I often didn't feel that great. But I think for me that was probably it. I didn't notice anything else at all. And then it came to my A-level exams, and I was just really unwell through them. I sat most of them with a bucket on my knee. I feel sorry for everybody else that sort of sat exams with me at that time, but just felt absolutely dreadful throughout them. And in the end, I was having lots of tests at the time because we thought something wasn't right, and the doctor actually told me to give up my A levels. So I had to literally stop in the middle of the exams. I sat about half my actual exams, and then he said to give up. But they didn't know really what was wrong with me at that point. I have a slight liver condition, which I think it's called Gilbert's syndrome. And all it does is my white blood cells, my liver doesn't get rid of my white blood cells very efficiently. So the count is always high in a blood test. But that's also one of the things that signals things like glandular fever, hepatitis. So during my diagnosis, I was sort of having to segregate myself from everybody because they thought it was hepatitis, and then they thought it was glandular fever. And then I had an appointment with the liver consultant, and he was about to discharge me. And during some of my tests, they'd said, BG levels are slightly inflated, but it's nothing much really. And he gave me this Gilbert syndrome diagnosis, which didn't seem to answer much because he said, you probably never notice it. You were probably born with it. You'll probably never notice it. If you don't drink much, you might go a bit yellow. But apart from that, that's likely to be it. So I was sat there thinking, well, that's it. Why am I not feeling so great? So I literally last thing I said before I went out the door from this consultant was, are my sugar levels okay now? Is that sort of righted itself? And he said, no, they are slightly inflated. We'll just send you for a glucose tolerance test, and the rest is history.
And that was it.
And that was it.
Gosh, That's wild.
So
So,
it was a really shocking time, because obviously you've spent
yeah.
2 years building up to your A levels, and I'd always been the sort of kid at school that I never really had problems with exams. I was quite lucky; they didn't really bother me, and I just sort
Mhm.
of whizzed through them. So to be sat there, I mean, as I say, some of the exams I didn't go to, others I ended up in a room on my own, others I was just being sick through. It was just a really, really horrible time, to be
Yeah,
honest,
it definitely sounds
at
it.
that point. And so yeah, my A levels sort of came and went, and then this sort of diagnosis continued after that, and I was eventually diagnosed. I've got the widest range of A levels, because they range from an A to an X, because I did well in one paper and I didn't even sit another one, so I have
The
an
full
absolute
scale.
wild range of A levels, but managed to get into university, um, and was diagnosed, I think, the Friday that I was going up on the Monday to uni, so which was perfect
Oh,
timing.
well. So what did they do? Did they admit you to hospital, or did they just sort of give you a rule book and send you on your way?
They at Derby, they sort of gave me a rule book and sent me on my way. But I went to I'd had a place at Sheffield University,
Hmm.
and there was a lady called Mary McKinnon there, who's sadly no longer with us, but was an amazing person who sort of took me under her wing. But by the time I got there, I mean, there's not that much of me now, and I'm sort of 11 stone, but I was 6.5 stone at the time.
Oh, good grief, yeah.
So there really was nothing on me at all. And I was in no mental state to go, to be honest. So I was kind of,
No.
I'd been sort of battered from pillar to post for like 4-5 months, wondering what was wrong and not knowing. And so I actually went up to Sheffield University, dropped my bags into my room, and then went straight into the university hospital there.
What a
And
start.
that
What a
was my
start to
start
your
to
uni.
university life. Yeah.
And did you know anything about diabetes at this time? Did you know anyone with it?
Not a lot.
No.
I had a mate as a school kid. I had a friend who had diabetes, but I guess like a lot of people, I didn't know much about it at the time. I know that when we used to be playing football, he'd sometimes have to go because he needed biscuits or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
And that was pretty much all I knew. I knew the basics, knew that people with diabetes had to take insulin,
Hmm.
and that's probably the limit of what I knew at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was again a little bit of a traumatic time, and
Oh, I bet.
went into university. That I remember about 2 days in, one of the lecturers came across and said, "Look, it's pretty heavy going at the start. I really would suggest that if you're not feeling it, then perhaps you consider having a year out." And so he said that. Like I say, I was mentally in bits at that point, because I first
Yeah.
time away from home, and in addition to having been away from home to learn how to live, I suddenly had this extra friend that I needed to carry around. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it was it
Yeah,
was
oh,
it was
I
hard.
can imagine it was really demoralising if you've went from being told not to sit your A levels, you've done them, you've made it to uni, and then you're kind of told, actually, we don't think you're good enough when this person's just caring about you, but that's what it would feel like.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think it felt like that, because I think I was relieved, because
Really?
I just
Oh,
didn't sort
yeah.
of. I guess I kind of didn't know how I was going to cope with anything at that point. So
Yeah.
so I was almost, phew, I can go home, get used to this thing for a bit, and then
Hmm.
we'll see where it takes me. So I
Yeah.
think, in actual fact, he probably did me a real favour, because it gave me a much more secure environment to start off and learn about it than in the middle of freshers year at university, where I'm sure I'd have done
Yeah.
things that would
Yeah.
would would
Maybe
really
not the
not have helped.
safest for a newly diagnosed type 1, yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of regime did they put you on? Was it pens and
Yeah, well, no, pens weren't in at that point. It was the old little
syringes?
plastic syringes. So this was
Yeah.
1989. Um, So it was little plastic syringes, and I had 2 units of insulin in the morning and 2 at night, and that was it.
No.
And put on 1/2 stone in a week.
Oh wow.
Having just had that, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. So yeah, I gather I must have been so sort of marginally over the normal limits that I really didn't get a lot of the classic symptoms.
Mhm.
And so it was just almost luck and me pushing the point with a with a consultant that ended up in getting me diagnosed.
Yeah. And well done for doing that. Yeah. It's hard to stand up for yourself when you're younger and you're poorly.
It was almost, I've heard other people say it, but I was almost at the point where I'd felt sort of unwell or not right for so long that I almost wanted somebody to tell me that I got something, so that
Yeah.
I could actually say, right, it's that. Now, can I do anything about it, sort of thing? Because it was just going on and on and on and just not feeling right. So, I mean, yeah, you start your A levels what time? May, and I think I was diagnosed sometime around about September.
Yeah.
So it was,
What a rough time as well, being that age.
wasn't great.
And then
You sort of build up
yeah.
to your exams for that 2 years while I was in the sixth form, and then to not be able to take them at the end was really demoralising.
I bet it was, yeah.
But school did a fantastic job. University accepted me, and then and then diagnosed and back home before you know it.
Did you eventually make it to Sheffield?
I didn't. No, I
No?
got a job. I got lucky because I'd got sort of 9 months, 12 months to kill, and I got a job at Derby City Council, and it was a temporary job for 9 months. So that was sort of perfect, and it get me a bit of time to learn how to deal with my diabetes. Worked there for a while, and then I was going to do accounts and finance at Sheffield University. I was in a finance department at Derby City Council, although doing a fairly basic, easy job, but really enjoyed it. And then I saw an advert for somebody wanting to take on a trainee accountant. Went for that job and got it, and I didn't go back.
Bit of a sliding doors moment for you
Yeah,
then.
complete change of direction in life, thanks to
Wow.
the diabetes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I had my little pot of test strips with the colour chart on the side,
Yeah.
and what I do remember was that over that 9 months of that job, obviously my honeymoon period sort of disappeared throughout that. I remember having lots of occasions where I'd suddenly have the dark green colour on the text strip, which meant that you were sort of, well, you didn't know where you are, but it was somewhere between sort of 15 and 20 probably. So I had a few of those, and bit by bit my insulin use sort of went up. And by the end of that 9 months, by the time I got my job, I was on a much larger dose, but still just the 2 injections a day of long acting insulin at the time. I mean, you look back on all the tools we have now and think, how on earth did I actually survive that period on
I know.
about 4
I know. I
rough
don't know
blood tests a
how
day
I'm
and
still
2
here.
injections? It does make you wonder, doesn't it, how we all made it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before we go on to talk about the kind of tech just now in the APS system that's the main focus of tonight, what technology are you using now and how does it help you in your everyday life?
So at the moment, I'm using a Dexcom One Plus as a sensor, which you get on prescription. I'm using a Dana Eye insulin pump, and yeah, that's an Android APS. So on my phone. So that's what I use at the moment. Very rarely do blood tests anymore. Don't tell anybody that, but I don't.
No, I don't either.
But yeah, that's what I use now.
Nice. People really seem to like the APS systems, and I don't know many people on the Dana. I think I only know one other person that's had one, but I've always heard good things about them. But the next segment that we're going to talk about is about technology, and specifically open source technology. So, Shaun, yourself, you're going to be sharing your experience using technology. And just to remind anyone listening that we are not healthcare professionals, and we would recommend that you speak to your own diabetes team about your diabetes care and management. But I'll hand over to Rich now to continue.
Thanks, Kirsty. Thank you very much. Hi, Shaun. I know you from a long time ago, mate. You sort of set the seed in my brain regarding automated insulin delivery, and I can't thank you enough for it.
I remember you turning up, Rich, to that meeting with a notepad and a pen, eager to learn, and, and the rest is history.
Yeah, absolutely. I just needed to manage my diabetes more, and you guys had got an evening meeting. I think it's some evening in November 2018, and you welcomed me, and I can't say it was just an incredible sliding doors moment, and I'll be forever grateful to you and Alistair and all the rest of them, Sarah. It was just Nick, everyone that was there. It was just one of those moments in time. It was just an incredible part of me journey into managing it and making it less of a problem.
I think it had sort of snowballed a little bit in Derby, didn't it? Because we had we obviously have Emma Wilmot, who is very forward with everything that she does, and we had Alistair, of course, who was heavily into the tech, and I guess it just snowballed, didn't it? One person got it and then told people about it, and then another person got it, and it really sort of took off in Derby at that point, didn't it?
Yeah, I remember Alistair. It was just a brief visit from Alistair. I think he was off to Liverpool to a Diabetes UK event, showcasing the open source technology. And Alistair said, "I've not got long. I'll just sit down." And he wrote down about 4 things on my notepad what I needed to look into getting this open source Android APS. And I went away, and each month, a couple of months passed, and I had to buy a Meow Meow Bluetooth sender that went onto the old Libra ones, and then an Android phone, and then it was just incredible, to have people locally that are able to explain the situation. They've got watches. I think Jeremy got a watch on with his blood sugar, and I was like, "Can you tell me how that works, Jeremy?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, it gets a signal from this thing on my arm," and it was just surreal. It was like, crikey. So basically, you're like a robot kind of thing. It was just a moment in time. It was.
Yeah.
So basically, we sort of basically talking about the We Are Not Waiting community. How we started using hybrid closed loop and stuff like that. What made you start using Android APS initially, Shaun? And what did you have to do to start your journey on Android APS? Did you do a similar thing, meet the people, talk to people, and mix and learn about it within the community, or a few friends that you knew?
Yeah, a little bit like that. I mean, I'd seen the We Are Not Waiting community, but if I'm honest, I didn't really know what it was. I saw it there and thought that seems an interesting little bit of a buzz phrase that's going on, but other things happening in life at the point didn't really do a lot with it. But then I knew Kev Winchcombe through the community, who was heavily involved in it with his daughter. At the time, sort of the Twitter, call it what, community was sort of really starting to develop and was really supportive at that time. So I sort of got involved in that a little bit, and a few of us were meeting up, and it was peer support, I guess. I know we'll come to that later. Was just starting to sort of happen without us really realizing what it was, and I started to learn a little bit, and then gradually, sort of the Freestyle Libra turned up, and I know that I bought that for a time because I was quite keen on just having more than the blood tests that I was doing. I mean, I was a bit was a bit obsessive. I'm an accountant. I love my numbers, so I was sort of doing loads of blood tests a day. I could easily do 10 blood tests a day, you know, and hospital told me to stop because that wasn't really healthy. But I just really wanted to understand what was happening, because I went through a time in my diabetes where I used to turn up at the hospital with a book full of pre-meal readings that were all 5s and be told that my HbA1c in old numbers at the time was sort of 8 and 9. So I wanted to understand what was actually happening there. And effectively, I was 5 before dinner, and then going up to 12, and then back to 5, and then up to 12 and back to 5 again. And I didn't really know it, so I was doing lots of blood tests and wanted to sort of track it down. Then the Libra came along, which obviously helped that. And then I think it was Alistair that mentioned the Meow Meow to me, which was obviously got the Libra to talk to your phone, and that was the start of the looping journey, really. That I got the Meow Meow in from China. I think you had to buy them from China at that point, and really had little idea of what I was letting myself in for, but then worked out that I could get my phone to read out my readings from that as well, which was handy when I was in the car and driving. So that was really the start of it, just that experiment that I think it was Alistair mentioned it to me, and that was it.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think, sort of pioneer, really, back in those days. I mean, that was, the Meow Meow was a very sophisticated bit of equipment back then. To intercept the Bluetooth signal from the sensor and then obviously transfer it to a phone was just it was almost sort of alien to us, wasn't it? But it
was very weird, wasn't it? Because you suddenly went overnight from having however many sort of blood tests a day to the Libra then suddenly giving you goodness knows how many extra, and then suddenly to be able to see that on your phone or the Libra reader or whatever it was at the time was just a whole new level of data, wasn't it? And as I say, I'm an accountant, that sort of thing gets me really excited. So yeah, that was great for me.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, since you've been using it, how have you found that you're using AAPS? How have you found it for you? Are there any particular features or functions that you like the most with using AAPS? Does it lessen the load kind of thing?
Yeah, from the Meow Meow and having those readings, I obviously then got in touch with Alistair, who said, yeah, you can link it all up and effectively get the whole thing working automatically. So that was where my first introduction really to AAPS was. Alistair had a stash of, I think, old pumps and old phones at the time, and I remember going around to his house and setting it up with Android APS, which, I mean, I'm not a computer programmer or a coder or anything like that. So the whole sort of concept of having to go onto a website and download some code and then use various bits of software I'd never seen or heard of and convert this into a device that could look after my diabetes for me was just a bonkers thought, to be honest. I'm like, how can that happen? How does that work? But sort of went down that route, started using AAPS, and of course you have to go through various constraints with AAPS. You're not allowed just to jump straight in and start using it full blown. You have certain objectives which are all have safety in mind that you have to pass before you can go on to the next objective. So you have to learn about it, and there's quite a lot of different things that you have to learn before you actually get to be able to loop with it, or even open loop as you did at first. You couldn't leave it to the machine to do. The first thing you had to get to was a point where it would make recommendations and you would do them so that you could get used to it. So yeah, I think sometimes people who've never used AAPS think that it's pretty scary, isn't it, going into that? And it is pretty scary because you're suddenly going from controlling everything yourself, aren't you, to kind of almost handing it over. And it was really it's really useful to have to do those objectives to start with, because bit by bit it gives you confidence. It teaches you little bits about how the software works. So you know, there's a lot of safety built into it, so that you can't just leap in and do something horribly wrong. But in terms of what it does for me, I mean, I think one of the key things with me is that I do like my sweet, sugary food, as many of you will probably know. So I've always kind of tried to not alter my diet too much for diabetes. I wanted to let it come and live with me rather than force its rules on me. So I've always been a bit of a sort of boundary pusher in terms of the fact that, going back to the days where I was diagnosed, it was one of these things that you know, you probably would. The hope was that you weren't going to have too much sweet stuff, and after Daphne came along, I decided that I was going to try and have my normal diet and make it sort of fit.
Yeah.
So that's what I did, and I think AAPS really gives me the tools to be able to do that. I've always, my problem's always been, I have hypos like everybody else, but say my early problems were that I was just going really high between meals. And I think with AAPS, there are so many things that you can change, and so many little tweaks that you can do, and you can literally have changes every hour of the day. If you've got, we were talking with Flip earlier about being poorly, you know, if you're poorly and the normal dose isn't working, you can literally just up everything by 10%. That doesn't work, you can go to 20%, and it gives you so much sort of flexibility that I really felt with me that it was just like, I mean, every bit of tech that comes along with diabetes, whether that's blood test meters and then the pens and then the pumps and that sort of thing, every little bit of tech that comes along, you sort of think, wow, this is life changing. But then when you start using a looping system of any kind, it really is life changing then, and you really do start to get your life back and sort of think, yeah, this is really something that is going to help people, and especially kids, obviously, moving forward, just to have the diabetes there as a bit of a passenger and not cause them quite as many issues as it did before. So I think this bit of kit is really, really life changing.
Yeah, absolutely, Shaun. Yeah, I mean, looking at it, I mean, you know, how do you find using Android APS differs from like any commercial hybrid closed loop systems in terms of like the control algorithms and customizations for you?
I think
is it more adjustable maybe than the commercial systems?
It is, and I think the natural thing is that commercial systems, the main fear, I think, of the commercial system manufacturers, aren't they, as they really don't want people to be having hypos caused by the software, by the algorithms, etc. So the algorithms and the whole setup is very, very geared, from what I've seen, to helping you avoid hypos, which is fantastic. You know, that's one thing. With me, it was the highs that were probably more of a problem. So the fact that it hasn't got, it is more adjustable, and it really, it's on your head, be it, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Yeah.
You take the choice to download the software with AAPS. You take the choice of how you use it, and it just allowed me to be a little bit more aggressive. So, for example, I have automations on mine, and I know that some of the systems now do it, whereby if my BGs do go above 11, my pump will immediately switch to 110% of my profile, because I know that once I get above 11, it tends to all get a bit stubborn and get stuck up there if I don't do something about it. So I've got it set to that. At the same time as well, I've got it set so that if my BGs dip into the 2s, it actually sends a text to me dad and tells me dad, who only lives half an hour up the road, that my sugars are in the 2s, and so he can actually do something about it, which, again, I know some of the other systems do that now, but that's really good as well. I'm not sure how much it helps, because whenever my dad gets a message, he just sends me a message back that just says low sugar, and I've kind of hoped that I know that's the case by the time I get that, but it's quite reassuring to know that he knows that my sugars are low, and then if I don't answer, then
he'd probably pop round. Yeah, absolutely.
He would pop round. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's it for me. I think it's just great that I can be a little bit more aggressive on the highs.
Yeah, we've got a community question here, and it says, it asks, is there a safety feature built into AAPS to prevent hypoglycemia or giving too much insulin?
Yeah, I mean, it's perhaps not as formal, but yes, it has the same tools there. So, for example, with my settings, I mean, you can almost be a little bit more creative with it. So if I have various automations set so that if I'm sort of in the 7s or 8s, but I'm going vertically down, I can change things at that point. So I can almost try and anticipate the lows a little bit. And so I have automations set so that when I'm dropping quickly, it turns things down. I have an automation as well at that point, which changes my target it aims for. So I have a hypo setting whereby it changes my target BG to 8.9 for an hour, which again means that it effectively cuts out any of the insulin that it's actually giving to me, because it starts to try to get me to a bigger target than the 5.5 or 6 that it's normally aiming at. So yeah, lots of different ways that that you can use AAPS to avoid you can never avoid them completely, but to minimize the effects of hypos.
Yeah, Ben, it can tend to prevent rebound hypos, can't it, as well, if you set a target, an automated target that sets it slightly higher, slightly elevated than your normal target. So it'll prevent any rebound hypos kind of thing, I guess, won't it?
I tend to try to do that, yeah. So if I have jelly babies for a hypo, if I'm heading down towards hypo land, I often have jelly babies just to prevent, and then put a hypo temp target on, so it puts it up to 8.9. That lasts for an hour. So jelly babies obviously make you climb, but because you don't get to 8.9, the system doesn't actually necessarily give you any insulin when it starts to climb, which normally means that you can then sort of drift back into target as the jelly babies get absorbed.
Yeah, that's excellent. Have you used your Android APS with a variety of different sensors and pumps? And if so, have you found that quite useful to try accommodate different combinations?
Yeah, I have. So I started with a Libre, but the thing that made me move on from the Libre in the end was that a new algorithm, the initial algorithm of AAPS, all it sort of did was it adjusted your basals basically. So it didn't actually give you little shots of insulin when it felt you needed it. All it did was sort of increase the basal. And what I found with that was that it was sometimes a little bit slow for me. So my BGs would be going up and up, and the basal would gradually go up and up as well. But then I was sort of in the 12s, 13s, perhaps before it came down. So a new algorithm came out, the SMB algorithm, which was more about rather than changing your basal, it sort of gives little micro boluses at the time. So if it senses that your blood glucoses are going up, then it will actually give you little extra shots of bolus. Now you can't do that without a more accurate CGM. So that's what pushed me to change from the Libre to the G6. Yeah. So that again changed things for me, because it then meant that the new algorithm I could use and have the micro boluses. And that I found was another sort of step forward for me, because again the micro boluses are a little bit more aggressive than changing the basal, so it actually usually manages to stop me from getting high in the first place. So yeah. G6 was really useful for that. And then I only moved on from the G6. I was trying to get funded when obviously the hybrid closed loops came onto the NHS. Unfortunately, I did try, but they wouldn't fund G6 for me. So I think it was Partha actually said to me, "Have you tried the One Plus, which is effectively a G7? It's very close to a G7." And I tried that, and with linking it through XStrip and then into AAPS, it does the same. It has the same accuracy. There's actually, you have to just be a little bit wary, because the G6 actually smooths your readings out in the sensor itself. So it if it senses that a data point is well out of line, it sort of smooths the curve so that you're not jumping backwards and forwards. And AAPS sort of relies on that. The One Plus actually doesn't do that. It doesn't smooth it, so the data that comes out is raw. And AAPS finds it a bit more difficult to work with that, because obviously if you go from 4 to 8, it can think that you're climbing rapidly and then go down to 5 again, because it's a bit of a noisy sensor. Then it can potentially cause problems. But AAPS software can actually do the smoothing for you. So that was something I had to get used to a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm happily using the One Plus now. I think it was Mark said earlier, I really like the 12-hour grace period that you get. So I do exactly the same. I put a new sensor on when my old sensor's got 12 hours to run.
Yeah.
And then it gets rid of the noisy warm-up readings that you sometimes get, and by the time it's ready to go at 12 hours, it's working great. So I'm now using that's on prescription, instead of sort of coughing up 150 quid a month as I was doing for a G6.
Yeah. I mean, that's good. That's good that it's working really well for you. Have you used a commercial hybrid closed loop system, or would you always tend to use AAPS? Would you consider using a commercial one? Would that do the same thing or a similar thing for you, or have you ever tried it?
Yeah, I think undoubtedly it would do similar. And when I last changed to the Dana Eye, the hospital sort of said, "Would you consider it?" But again, I think for the reasons that I sort of said before, the fact that I can be a little bit more aggressive with it, and I can tweak it, and I have more control over it. I guess maybe I'm a bit of a control freak. I don't know, but I have more control over it. So I haven't. I mean, Sarah, my other half, has the IPSO, and using Cam APS, and she's completely the opposite to me in that she probably doesn't eat many carbs at all, and it works brilliantly for me. So, funnily enough, she was on AAPS and didn't really work for her because she didn't want to spend the time on it. And Cam APS, you don't need to spend the time on it. So we're both getting very, very similar numbers now. So Sarah's getting really great results with Cam APS commercial, and I'm getting really great results on AAPS, although our eating habits are probably completely opposite each other.
Wow, yeah, that's interesting. That's really good to compare the two systems. What are your hopes and aspirations of the future of AAPS and technology in general? Do you think, I mean, I know it's an open source platform, do you think that'll be ever integrated into like the NHS, or would it? I know the guy that developed it, I think his daughter had type 1 diabetes, and he wanted a better system to manage his daughter's diabetes. Would that ever become commercially available, or do you think it's a bit too sort of? Because I know when I started running Android APS, I had to sign a disclaimer in my clinic saying I'll take responsibility if anything goes wrong, kind of thing. What do you think hopes and aspirations for the future of Android APS are?
I don't know that it will. I know there has been talk in the past about trying to get some funding and go down the commercial route, but I don't really have any insider knowledge of what it's like. But you just imagine, don't you, that it's a heck of a journey to get from being open source software, which must in some cases I think frighten the NHS to death. I mean, I must say the NHS were brilliant with me. They did the same, Rich. I had to sign something, but they said, look, we'll support you. we'll continue to support you exactly as we did before, but obviously we can't support the software because it's not in our remit to do. So I was really quite happy with that. I don't know. I'm not sure it will ever go, because I think commercial will probably catch up at some point.
Yeah. No, some of the commercial systems are pretty good now. And I know one or two people have mentioned they're not as quick in acting on a risen blood sugar. Say if it's above 12, like you say, 11, 12. Sometimes, like I know a few people on other hybrid closed loop systems commercially available, they tend to see it takes a fair while for it to come back into range, and they're a bit worried about that at any given time. But they'll I think they will catch up eventually. I think it'll get there.
I think they will one day. They'll get there. I mean, you can understand though, can't you? The commercial systems, they don't want to hit you with loads of insulin when you're 12, because you know what it's like. You can stack, can't you? And then suddenly you're plummeting like a stone. So I totally understand that, but I do think it will catch up at one point. And I kind of think that's where it will end up. I think the commercial systems probably will catch up, and then there may be no need for AAPS to go commercial, because the alternatives will be there. But for now, it's it really works. It really works for me. It has its downsides, obviously, Rich, as you know, in that if you need an upgrade, it's a case of building the software again. And like I say, I'm no great techie, and the instructions have really improved over the years. So I literally do follow blindly instructions without really actually knowing what they're doing, but they work. It talks you through it. It gets you there. And that can be difficult, especially as you get older as well, having to do that on computers and whatever and build it. But the community, the APS community, has been brilliant about that. But yeah, I think the commercials will catch up, Rich. So that might spell the end for AAPS at some point in the future, but I think there's plenty of life in it yet.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. When you share your data, do you give you? I know I've got on my nightstand, I've got a link that anyone down the country can put in and see what my records are. Do you share your data with your clinic when you go? I mean, I presume you do a 12-monthly appointment or 6-monthly appointment with your clinicians, either Emma or Tom or whatever in Derby. Do you share your information with them online, kind of thing?
Yeah, I always give them my Night Scout data, which is, it's effectively just a website, isn't it? It's a website with it's quite a bizarre concept, really, isn't it? To think you can go on the internet and see how the inside of your body is working. It's a bit of a weird one, that, isn't it, to think about? But yeah, I've always been quite happy to share my data, because I think that we all learn, don't we? We all learn from each other, and I think it's really useful for the clinicians to actually see these traces and see how it works, and they can then hopefully get a bit more confidence with it and support others that might want to use APS for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's great. I know we've obviously gone through it briefly, but who do you reach out if you've got any problems with the AAPS system? Do you use a community and peer support? And I guess like similar to me, we'll have a meeting in Derby and stuff like that. So you'll kind of do the same thing, presumably. You'll reach out maybe to people that are in that sort of circle of Android APS and just bounce ideas off each other, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. Like I said before, the instructions have really come on leaps and bounds since I've used AAPS, and they're really good now. And again, it's with it being community based, the instructions develop as people report issues, and things that they can't do. So it's the instructions have changed a lot over the years. So my first port of call is normally just to have a look at the instructions.
Yeah.
But then there are people. Funnily enough, Jill is a friend of mine in Derby, Jill Gordon, and she and I have had pump upgrades on the same day for about 3 pumps now, and she uses AAPS as well. So the pair of us kind of get our heads together and look things up when we need to, then also reach out on the Facebook groups, and you can normally get an answer at some point. There's very rarely is it that you're the first person to find a problem. There's usually somebody that's already been there and done it and bought the t-shirt, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back at the instructions, they've gone on. They're quite in depth, and it's quite a. I mean, it's not online resource. I'll try and put a link on at some point so people can have a look if they want to. But what advice would you give to people who are actually thinking of starting Android APS? What resources would you recommend to learn about it? I'll put a link on with the Android APS Read the Docs, and there's a similar thing to Android APS on the Open Loop. The iOS platform, I think, isn't it, Shaun?
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 sort of different open source systems, because Loop is another system, isn't it? So
yeah.
as well as Open APS and Android APS. I would certainly say that the instructions are a decent place to start, because they are kind of laid out quite well. There's lots of guidance online now, and obviously most with it being not a commercial, not an NHS system, that tends to be the place that you need to go for it. And the communities are great. There's plenty of people out there that will help you through it. But I would certainly recommend do your research first. I think you've perhaps to use AAPS well, you've got to be prepared to give it a bit of time to get your settings right and to learn how it works. I think if you haven't got that time and haven't got that headspace, then it's probably better to go for a commercial system. And myself and Sarah are prime examples of that. I have a bit more time, and I've got a sort of natural sort of tendency to want to look at the data and tweak it and fiddle with it and make it as good as I can. And Sarah would sort of sooner, she's got more to do than me, and would sooner sort of leave it a bit more to the system. And as I say, the commercial system is working equally as well for her as AAPS works for me. And I mean, my stats at the moment on AAPS, just to look at this week, my last 7 days, I'm 86% in range, 12 above and 2 below, which I would say is fairly average. On when I have good weeks and good fortnights, sometimes it all works, but then again, sometimes it just does that with diabetes, doesn't it? Sometimes it seems to go well, and I can get up into the 90s for a time. I had the odd 100% in range days as well, but and then other days it doesn't behave as it did the day before, and it still goes wrong even with commercial systems and an APS. But I like to feel that it doesn't go as wrong for long, and certainly when you're ill and stuff like that, I think the added flexibility makes it much easier to keep your numbers sort of where you like them to be.
Yeah, I know Paul says that if you're 70% or above, predominantly you're doing a cracking job, and obviously anything above that is a bonus, really.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's cracking. That's really, really good. Thanks ever so much for that. I'm just going to hand over to Kirsty now. We're just going to do a report on the mental health and peer support. If you're there, Kirsty, do you want to take over from?
Yeah.
Thanks, Shaun, for that, mate. You're very insightful.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Yeah. It's just slightly kind of shifting away from diabetes and going to mental health. So, what does mental health mean to you, Shaun? And is there anything you do to improve your mental health?
Yeah, I mean, mental health is, I think, affects people with diabetes often have issues, don't they, with mental health? Yeah. And I certainly have. And I mean, I talked earlier about the exams that I couldn't actually do, and I then decided to become an accountant and had a whole load of exams ahead of me. And in the wake of not being able to do those A levels, I just couldn't sit exams. I just had a complete mental block about these exams, and I couldn't actually turn up. Was in a blind panic for the first exam I tried to do as a professional afterwards, and just simply couldn't do it. So that was kind of probably my first introduction to the fact that mental health was really a thing, and I had to get help, and had behavioural therapy and various other things to enable me to do sort of 7 years worth of professional exams. So and I think it just takes its toll, doesn't it? It's relentless. You don't get a day off, and when you've got other things in your life isn't always smooth, is it? And diabetes is just one extra thing that can weigh you down, that can cause burden. And I think it's really important that we recognise that, you know, diabetes takes a great strain on your mental health, and it can make you feel really, really burnt out. People experience different problems, don't they? And I used to be told, I think one of my biggest problems was I used to get too obsessive with the data, and the nurse would say to me, just have a week off. And I was like, well, how do you do that? You know, because diabetes isn't going to have a week off. You know, how does that work?
You can't just put it in a drawer and forget about it like it's a work phone. Yeah.
Do I just bang all the rules? But eventually I did sort of learn just to dial it back.
Yeah.
You know,
on that though, do you find, so obviously you deal with massive amounts of your own diabetes data, do you find that to be you kind of taking the bull by the horns, or does it ever overwhelm you? Because I think it would overwhelm me having all that kind of power.
Yeah, and I can thoroughly understand that. I guess that's my job. You know, I deal with numbers, I interpret data all the time, so it doesn't feel that different to what I'm actually doing as a job. But you know, I do have days. I mean, alarms, they just drive you bananas, don't they? Sometimes, you know, and I do have days where an alarm will go off, and I do scream at the thing, you know, because I just don't want to know anymore. So
yeah, you're allowed to though. It's your diabetes. You can scream at it if you want.
Yeah, exactly. And I just try and roll with those punches, really. But I totally understand that there are days when I don't want to do it. But I think for me, because of the makeup of my personality, it works. It works. And but that's not to say that there aren't days when I don't think, yeah, I can't look at this any longer.
No, I mean, everybody gets fed up of looking at things and dealing with things. You can't absorb everything 24 hours a day.
That's it. I'm really lucky though, because my other half's a DSN, so when it gets too much for me, I just subcontract my diabetes to her. So
absolute lottery winner there, yeah. So you've mentioned, so obviously you'll get peer support through her and in its kind of own beautiful way, and you've mentioned kind of learning about the pump systems and the looping through the diabetes community. So I take it you believe that peer support is important. So what's your kind of views on peer support?
I think it's massive, and I mean, I think until I had my insulin pump, which was, I don't know, probably 20 years into my diabetes journey, I'd not really spoken to anybody with diabetes. Really? And at the time when I did get my insulin pump, peer support was not quite off the ground. And what actually happened was that you were invited into a clinic appointment with somebody that already had an insulin pump. And he became a close friend of mine, and that was my introduction to it, I guess, because he helped me out getting into the insulin pump. He helped me learn the insulin pump. And then, of course, Twitter sort of took off, the diabetes community took off, and we had a few meetups, and I used to come away from those meetups, and there's nothing quite like you going to a diabetes meetup and you sit at the dinner table and it's a bloodbath because everybody's doing blood tests here, there, and everywhere, you know. And for the first time, it's like, yeah, this is pretty cool. You know, I quite handle this. You know, I'm not the only one here. And I used to come away from those meetups with the sort of warm, fuzzy, bouncy feeling, thinking, yeah, right, okay, I'm energized, I'm ready to go now. I'm gonna knuckle down and have another good go at this. And then from that, we started the Derby Facebook group in 2016 with nobody, with no members at the time, just two of us, with the idea of sort of trying to replicate those gatherings, but they could almost be close to 24/7. You know, if we can get enough people on the Facebook group, then there'll be some people who want to actively be on there and take part. There'll be others who watch from the sidelines. But you know, if we can share experiences, it might help people. So that was where I took it next on that grounds. And I think over the years it's helped the group, and peer support generally now has helped many people in many different ways with diabetes, whether that's practical because people have knocked their last sensor off and somebody else can go and I've certainly done a couple of journeys through my Facebook group where I've taken a spare sensor over to somebody. In fact, I even had an occasion where a lady joined the Facebook group. She was based in Essex, and we're normally a Derby-based group. And she was actually a lady from a Facebook group in Essex, from an equivalent peer support group. Her friend was in Derby with I think he was a 10-year-old, 11-year-old boy in a football tournament. They were stopping at a hotel in Derby, and he just knocked off his last sensor. So I wandered across to there and helped a lad out from Essex, because we managed to get a sensor together for him. So it works from the very practical like that to also the mental. I think often it's fear of the unknown, doesn't it, when people are worried about stuff?
Yeah.
And I think that if there's somebody, there's normally, we've got enough people in the group now so that there's always somebody that's gone through what you're going through now. And I think just little things like this is what happens when you go for your eye screening, just to take a bit of the mystery out of it, so that you're not just going into the unknown. I think that has a massive help mentally, as well as the physical things. So yeah, I mean, I obviously then I got involved in the peer support sort of document for the NHS, which was sort of the next sort of phase for that. So yeah, I'm massive on it, because I just think problem shared, is less of a problem, isn't it? And people use it in whichever way they want to, but you can use it in many different ways and still get help from it.
Yeah, and I always like to think of the peer support communities as being like a pay it forward scheme. So you could help one person, they help another person, they help another person.
Absolutely.
And that's like almost magical thing.
It is, yeah, it really is. And I set the group up, but I get as much help from it as anybody else. So it's I think we all just learn from it at all times. There's been some magical sort of conversations on there, some difficult ones sometimes as well, because people have different opinions about stuff, but also there's been some really cracking conversations that must have helped a lot of people over the time. And even Rich there is obviously got a big boost in his diabetes control from peer support, from just going along to a meeting one night. And he's a great example really of what can happen.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's so nice to hear about successful stories of peer support as well, because I think so many times you can try so hard to set things up and they don't really, in my experience anyway, they don't really pick up, or so it's really nice to hear that you've tried and you've done this and you've been so successful, and so many people have been helped because of it.
Yeah, it's a great thing, and I think when Partha started pushing it on the NHS, there was finally that realization that clinicians, you can't turn up at a clinician's and give you a pill for diabetes and you go away and it's okay, can you? It's where do you go when you get in at 10 o'clock at night and you've had a day full of 2s and 14s, you're feeling at the end of your tether. Where'd you go at that point? You can't go to a healthcare professional, can you? Because there's not one out there. So I think
you can go to the little group of guardian angels on your phone.
Exactly. You go to that. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, group of guardian angels on your phone, and it, as I say, just kind of makes you feel better, doesn't it? So, well, I hope it makes people feel better anyway. That's why we did it. We didn't know at day one whether we'd get anybody interested or not, but luckily it did sort of take off, and now the group almost runs itself, because there are like I say, there are always people on there who have experienced what you're starting to experience if it's something new. So I love it. And then obviously Tom and the great work he does with Diabetes Chat, the more the merrier as far as I'm concerned. Different platforms, different ways of doing it, so that there's options out there for people who want to get peer support and like one way over another. I don't think there can be enough, really. I think it's just one of those things that it is the missing link with diabetes. It's just somebody to hold your hand or say, yeah, I get it.
Absolutely. They've started introducing it with the pump onboarding in Scotland. So I'm one of the peer support workers on that team. So there's people with diabetes at the pump onboarding. And I always wish there was a day there when I was getting onboarded, because you don't know what diabetes is like unless you're living with it.
No.
24 hours a day.
No.
So that is wonderful.
No, that's brilliant. I mean, that's I guess that's kind of the modern day version, isn't it, of my
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
meeting with Gary, my mate, in that clinic, just me and him, sort of, as his pump meeting. So yeah, it's I think that's brilliant, isn't it? And the amount of long phone calls that me and him had at that point, you know, because I think we were both the only person that the other person knew. So we used to spend hours talking on the phone about the little hints and tips that you pick up, you know, as you actually live with diabetes. And again, I think that's a massive thing you get out of peer support, isn't it? The fact that
Absolutely.
just the little life cheats almost that work, that again, unless you've lived with it, you just don't know about these things. So yeah, I just found that I learned so much off other diabetics that just wanted to give everybody that sort of chance.
Absolutely. And it's really nice just to kind of let your guard down a bit as well.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I made a deliberate sort of decision with my group. You know, we don't let healthcare professionals into our group. I always made, you know, from the word go, I eat way too many cakes and sweets, and you know, that's I'm happy for people to sort of know that, because I wanted it to be a group where you could come on and say, yeah, this isn't working, you know, and people just help without judging as well. So
absolutely. There's something so important about talking about diabetes whilst not being the poster child for it.
Yes, exactly.
It's important that people know you're a real person. You will have sweets, you'll have a drink at the weekend, you'll eat a pizza and have a high blood sugar for 18 hours. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
You can do that. You just need to learn how to do that.
And realistically, there's nobody that doesn't, is there? There's nobody with diabetes that doesn't experience those highs and those lows. Doesn't matter what system you're on or whatever, you that's going to happen to you. So yeah, it's really important to know, isn't it, that it's not you being bad or doing something wrong or not doing what you should. You know, it just happens.
Yeah. Well, do you know, it's been really nice listening to you tonight, Shaun. Thank you for coming on and being our guest speaker, sharing your journey and your lived experience, your story with tech and your benefits that you've experienced through the diabetes community. And just a reminder to anyone that if you are thinking about exploring kind of DIY looping or the open sourcing, the internet does have some kind of great resources, but speak to your healthcare professionals and your diabetes team first.
Absolutely.
Or as part of your journey.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.